I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. It's the Friday show. And, lately we've been doing two things on a Friday show. Sometimes we do a call-in show where people can call in and ask me questions, something I truly enjoy doing. But we still leave it open for the luminaries, and they come in about every other week. I'm having a luminary on now, just like we used to have them on every week. And this guy's been on the show before. He came to my attention back in 2017. He sent me his book, Estrogeneration. And I read it, and it was intriguing. Some of it I thought, a little tinfoil hatty, but very intriguing. And as it turns out, everything that's in that book, you should really go read it, because everything that's in that book we're now talking about is now right in the forefront. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Anthony J. Yeah. Oh, geez. Wrong one. There we go. You got me so flustered over here, Anthony.
I get the soundboard now. I like it. Well, you know what's funny about that is your book, even before mine, called a lot of the shots on the grains and all the nonsense going on with the sugar and the diet. So kudos to you. In fact, I'd never told you this. I don't know if anybody knows this, but your podcast was the first podcast I ever did when I came out with my book. I had a bunch of them lined up in my schedule, but yours was literally the first one ever. So you were on the ball early.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I saw what you had going on. It's like, I have to talk to this guy. Just so that people know, people come in here. I've had actual guys come on. Yeah, I'm a doctor. And then you get them on and they're doing epidemiological studies at some small university in the middle of nowhere. Other times people call themselves doctors, and it turns out they're chiropractors, right?
Yeah.
I like to always let people know, and there's nothing wrong with chiropractors. I don't have anything against them. But I hate when people go, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a medical doctor. And then you start talking to them and they're a chiropractor. In other words, if someone's having a heart attack on a plane and the pilot says, we have a heart attack, is there a doctor on the plane? The cardiologist cannot raise his hand.
Right.
And that's where I draw the line. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So this guy has all the bona fides. Dr. Anthony J. When we first met, you were with the Mayo Clinic. No big deal.
Yeah, or Boston University Medical School, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I went from Boston University Med School to Mayo Clinic. So yeah, one of those. Mm-hmm.
So if someone was having a heart attack on the plane and you're sitting next to the chiropractor, you're the guy standing up.
Probably. Yeah, I used to do a lot of heart disease research. And
yeah, but on the plane, beggars can't be choosers, right? It's like, well, I'm not a cardiologist, but exactly. I went to Boston College and Mayo Clinic thought enough of me, so there we go, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I want to get into your book just a little bit, just to give people an idea. I mean, it's a fascinating book. Mm-hmm. I used to drink out of plastics that I thought had the right number on the bottom, right? You see the little triangle on the bottom of any kind of plastic. And Anthony came on the show and he's like, no, there's no safe number on the bottom of the bottle. And now they're then they got into, because it's kind of like in my world, Anthony, they'll say no grains, but here's some konjac.
Oh, well, yeah. Some quinoa.
Yeah, here's some quinoa. They're hitting your liver exactly the same way. Your liver doesn't go, oh wait, he gave me konjac. I'm not gonna process that, as something that's gonna cause a load on my blood. You were the same way when you started going, oh, don't believe the BPA stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Give us an idea. Lead me in.
Well, these companies play a shell game with those plastics, because if they make something BPA free, they use BPS or BPF or BPAF. And if they're not even using bisphenols, they use phthalates. They put phthalates in all these plastics. And of course, phthalates are found in fragrances too, which is ridiculous. You know, if you literally look up FDA, their own website, and phthalates, you find like hundreds of personal care products that contain phthalates, which are plastic chemicals. So people are rubbing them on their skin. They act like estrogen. They disrupt your testosterone. Obviously not a good thing. And that's what you see in our culture. Testosterone just keeps declining.
Yeah. It's supposedly becoming a problem. And, I remember the first time I had you on, we were talking, it was like I had just bought a brand new car and it still smelled new. And you were like, oh, that new car smell is really not
plastic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like all plastic, just off gassing, and you're in this enclosed space with it. I remember driving that car. Every time I got in it, I would put the windows down to hopefully get it to off gas a bit, So when you think about all these different places that these phthalates and everything is coming in, so they'll say, oh, it's BPA free, yet there's a chemical in there that's actually much worse. And you know this, and I'm sorry that I do this to you, but since I have Anthony's email, if I change to a different soap, I write to him and go, hey, I'm using this soap now, right? And it's usually a pine tar soap. I don't care about some fragrance in a soap. I'm just trying to get some kind of glycerol to get dirt to lift from my skin and wash off, right?
Yeah. No, it's good. And it's good to double check all that stuff, because there's so many companies that are just trying to make a dollar and they don't care about your health, and they're sneaking all kinds of nonsense in there. And yeah, you have to be careful, unfortunately, in our country, especially. In Europe, most of these chemicals are illegal. I did a video on a podcast recently, and this person made it into a short for YouTube or whatever, and it got over 1 million views in the first week. And it was on the topic of azodicarbonamide, which is literally yoga mat material they put in the bread. And that stuff is illegal in Europe. They're not allowed to put yoga mat material in the bread, but in America, they do it all the time,
Okay, talk to me about that, because I've heard that. Well, I'm going to use the company. I heard it associated with Subway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not real. So it's real, right? But you hear things on the internet and you go, really? Come on. So why would they use the product? And then tell us what it does to us.
Well, number one, it's pretty much, indestructible, so incorruptible. So you can have bread that lasts forever, pretty much, if you put enough yoga mat material in there. Bacteria don't want to eat it. Your gut bacteria don't want to eat it. You probably don't want to eat it if you know it's in there, so they sneak it in there. And Subway, thankfully, after the public outcry, they actually removed azodicarbonamide. So that was one positive out of making it a public thing. But there's a lot of other fast food chains and breads at the grocery stores and things. They sneak it in there. They put it in there. And they put a bunch of other dough conditioners and other nonsense in there too. So even if you don't find that specific one, there's other alternatives, just like the BPA thing, right? It's like, even if it doesn't have BPA, it doesn't mean it's good for you. But yeah, it started with the Subway thing. And it's just bad for your gut bacteria. It's just questionable ethics. There's not even a lot of studies on it. So it's hard to pin down, like, oh, is it causing cancer, colon cancer, whatever? I don't know. But because they're not doing research on it, because it should just be illegal. It's crazy.
Yeah. Look, a lot of stuff I take on the internet, I just take it with a grain of salt, because back during COVID, and I'd like to get your views on COVID, because I know you have a strong stance on it. But during COVID, they turned it into a political stance, right? And I had friends out in California going, Joe Rogan has taken horse pace. And I'm like, okay, Joe Rogan's got bazillions of dollars. I'm pretty sure that if he wanted to take ivermectin, he's not taking the horse-paced version of ivermectin. I'm pretty sure. And I didn't know anything about ivermectin. I don't know anything about drugs at all. But I said to myself, I wonder if I've ever taken ivermectin. And it turns out I have. They give it to you as a prophylactic when you go to a third world country.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And my buddy, who was yelling about horse pace, came to India with me, and he was going, Joe Rogan is so stupid. Who would ever take horse pace? And I said, Andy, you took the same drug when we went to India. And then I looked it up because I'm an idiot, right? I like to learn things. So it's like, why is everyone talking? Well, and by the way, I don't know if ivermectin saved one life during COVID. I don't know if it works. If it doesn't work, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Maybe you could give us some insight on it. But I remember thinking, okay, let me look this drug up because everyone's saying horse paste. Turns out the drug has been around forever and ever and ever. And it's one of the few drugs that women can take when they're pregnant, right? So most things like this, they don't take, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, meaning Advil or whatever. Yet ivermectin is okay for pregnant women. So when you start saying these things, well, they're putting, yoga mats in your bread, I take it all with a grain of salt. But you're here to tell me that this is a real thing.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it started with the masking nonsense. I was frustrated with the masks because, it was pretty obvious that the virus particles can go through masks, and most of that was just shenanigans and nonsense. Like Mayo Clinic had people at the front doors. When I had to go into the doors, they had to make sure I had a mask on. They basically had bodyguards at all the door locations.
Yeah.
And I was already irritated with that. I went on the news, the local news channel there. They had me on, and I told them, like, look, you want immunity from COVID, right? We don't want elderly people getting it. We don't want obese people getting it. But if you're healthy, you want to get COVID and then get natural antibodies and get over it right away. And then you've got amazing immunity to it because natural antibodies are the best. I literally said that like before they even came out with a COVID vaccine on the news. And then they had other Mayo Clinic doctors come on and like argue against that and all this nonsense. But then when they started forcing the vaccine, when the vaccine came out, a lot of it was they didn't want ivermectin to be researched. They didn't want it studied. They wanted the emergency use authorization, right? They wanted to force the vaccine and say, we don't need to do the research. We have to expedite the timeline. We got to push it on the population. We have to force people to have it. And it was totally experimental, right? This whole mRNA thing was completely irresponsible. I mean, yeah, if you wanted to take it, I don't have a problem if people want to take it, and neither did you. But yeah, the problem I had, and probably you too, is the forcing it onto people. And I literally quit my job over it. That's how much I thought about it. I was working at Mayo Clinic. I left. I quit, and I still lived in Rochester for a couple of years, and then finally I was able to move across the border over to South Dakota. But that's just a choice that I made because land is cheaper, and and I work remote. I mean, I do DNA consulting full time pretty much, and I do a lot of writing and speaking. But the point is, right? The vaccine, the way I've always described it was, you're trying to create antibodies against the letter S. It's a spike protein. Just think of it as the letter S. If your immune system creates antibodies against COVID, there's literally I think there's 24 proteins on the COVID virus, 24 proteins. And so when you get exposed to that, your body makes 24 different antibodies, probably thousands of different antibodies, but let's just think of it as an alphabet and think of A, B, C, D. You're making antibodies to entire alphabet. And then when you get this COVID vaccine, you're only supposed to be making antibodies against the letter S. Which one do you think would be better, right? If you're making letters A through Z antibodies or just letter S. So in other words, like just basic logic, you don't even have to read the studies initially because there was no studies initially. And by the way, the thing that made me most irritated with the whole thing was drug companies, they don't have to release their data on anything. Like if they come out with a statin, Vinny, most people don't know this. If a drug company comes out with a statin, they don't have to release any studies to the public. They can just push it out and say, oh, it's FDA approved, it's fine. And as a scientist, I can't look at that and say, oh, I read the studies and it was good, or I read the studies and it was bad. I can't even see the studies. They don't have to release them. They can basically cherry pick the data that they want. They give it to the media and they push that out and they say, here's the data that we found. I can't look at the actual studies. But what's crazy, like if a statin has a lot of side effects, you can sue the company and subpoena the data from the lawyers. So you can actually get the data eventually, right, through legal means. The thing about vaccines is you can't do that. You can't subpoena the companies and actually get the vaccine data, as you probably know, right? Because of the vaccine court. That's sketchy.
All right, so let's dive into this just a bit. There's something else I want to talk to you about today, but now you got my interest, and I've never really gone down this road before. As you know, I always look at COVID and the vaccine as the third rail. Should I assume you've never taken the vaccine?
Correct. Oh yeah, never.
Okay, I've taken the 2 shots,
Mm-hmm.
and I did it willingly. It was willingly against my will, and I'll tell you why I took it. My mother-in-law, who lives in Europe, was sick and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I had to travel back and forth to Europe a few times.
Yep. That's how they
You,
got people. Yeah.
that you cannot get on that plane. Well, you get on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
but they were going to turn you around when you got there in the airport and send your ass right back.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You had to have the shots. I begrudgingly took the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I got the 2. I never went for any boosters. I never went for anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the old shoot and pray. Shoot me up, and I'm praying that it's going to all be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Till this day. And I'm glad I went, because my mother-in-law was a sweet, great woman, and I wanted to support my wife. I did what I did.
Mm-hmm.
My wife took it, but we didn't want to.
Right.
You
Oh,
know,
a lot of people were in that scenario. Yeah.
we did not want someone to die alone.
Mm-hmm.
When she has other kids around, my wife wanted to see her mother, and I wanted to be there with my wife. We made a decision. We made an executive decision. Now, my question to you is, should I be worried now?
I don't think so. I think if you're healthy, your body has good autophagy. The problem with most people, Vinny, is they're on a sugar-based metabolism. Most people wake up at 6 a.m., they eat carbs, they eat oatmeal. They have a snack at 9 a.m. They eat again at noon. They eat again at the snack at 3 p.m. They have a dinner at 6 p.m. They have a snack at 9 p.m. Sometimes they even go crazy and have a midnight snack because their blood sugar is crashing at midnight. They're on a sugar-burning metabolism. Remember, and you know this, I've seen your documentaries, by the way, I love them. The fat burning metabolism is a clean energy, right? If your body's burning fats, it's like a Tesla. There's no emissions coming out the back. If you're burning sugar for energy, it's like a diesel truck. There's black smoke coming out the back, right?
Right.
And your sugar spiking and crashing every 3 hours and that sort of thing. And honestly, most Americans are told to be on a sugar burning metabolism. They're told to eat tons of whole grains and avoid fats and eat low fats and don't eat red meat and all this nonsense. And so people literally think they're doing the right thing by having super low cholesterol and burning sugar all the time for energy. And ultimately that leads to diabetes, but it also inhibits autophagy. If you're burning carbs for energy, your body does not take out the trash. Your cells don't take out garbage. They don't have autophagy. If you're burning fats for energy, you have amazing autophagy. And there's a ton of research studies that show that, right? And yes, the spike protein can stay in your body a long time. Yes, the mRNA vaccine probably can incorporate into your body in weird ways. I mean, without a doubt, it can, right? But in some people, that's going to last 3 to 5 years, maybe more. Who knows? But those people are on crazy sugar burning metabolisms. I wouldn't worry about it if you're intermittent fasting, you're burning fats for energy, and you're exercising, and probably even using a sauna would help, because saunas increase a lot of trash taking as well. They just speed up molecular motion. You sweat a lot of garbage out, but you also clean up a lot of junk inside your body when you're using a sauna.
I don't use the sauna quite as much as I'd like to. I've been threatening to build one in my backyard because I have a building I can build one in. I just haven't gotten around to it. I had to take over my own vitamin company, so that takes up all of my time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, with all of the sweating I do, doing aerobic activity, I walk all day, every day when I'm on the phone. I just walk the neighborhoods, usually with a rucksack on, half the time, 3/4 of the time. I go to the gym, I pump iron here in my gym. I'm always moving. And you're right, I live in dietary ketosis. Right. I wake up in the morning, my blood sugars, I have high blood sugar in the morning. I'm somewhere between, I'm one of those guys, when I wake up, it's between 95 and 105. Right?
Dawn effect. Yep.
I have the dawn effect. But, if I check it any other time in the day, not right after a workout, because sometimes that'll spike a bit. Any other time, 78, 80, 81, some crazy number like that. And it just runs right there. And whenever I put the ketone strip in there, I'm always between 0.7 and 1.1. So I'm that guy.
Sure.
You're telling me that that's all good. So if people are eating low carb or low carb and also fasting
Mm-hmm.
and exercising, we can probably run this drug out of our bodies in a few years. Is that what
I'm
I'm hearing?
confident. Yeah, I don't know that for sure, but I'm confident. A lot of it is fear mongering because people are selling products, right? So it's hard to get the reality on this stuff. Like there's
Mhm.
nattokinase and stuff. And sure, nattokinase is a little bit of a blood thinner and it probably helps in certain situations. I'm not opposed to nattokinase, but I'm just saying, like, if your sole mission in life is to sell nattokinase, you're going to convince everybody they got to take it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Of course. Of
And
course.
I took it once just as an experiment. I got a bloody nose. It thins my blood too much, you know. So that's
Yeah.
not a good thing. I don't need overly thin blood. I'm going to get internal bleeding if I get injured if I have that, right? So there's,
Exactly.
you know, there's complicated. There's unique situations for different people, but I think the foundation is just fat burning.
Well, that's good to know because we do a lot of that here. And it's something that I think about and worry about all the time. And often wonder, like I have one of my best friends never took it, right? And he got COVID early on, early
Mhm.
COVID when people were dying. He was fine.
Yep.
My younger brother, who is morbidly obese, he was 340 pounds when he got COVID before the vaccine was out.
Mhm.
No problem, right? So not all morbidly obese people died from it,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
So he was healthy in other ways, I guess, that precluded him from dying from it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing where people are, oh boy, that thing's in you for the rest of your life. And I'm glad that you cleared that up, that we can possibly get rid of it.
It's always hard. I mean, that's classic epidemiology, right? Is you take a group of Americans and then you do a study and then you say, you make some kind of conclusion. It's like, yeah, like, so for example, fiber is good. Everybody's saying, oh, fiber's super good. Well, that's because they did all the studies on people drinking Mountain Dew. And of course, if you're drinking straight liquid sugar, you need fiber to slow down the absorption of all that sugar that's just blasting in your system. What if you're not drinking Mountain Dew and Coca-Cola? It's like, well, then it's not so good for you. It's just stressing out your gut in a lot of cases. It's unnecessary in a lot of cases, right? Again, it's case by case, but you can't lump a group of Americans together and recognize that that's, again, you can't see that as the gold standard in scientific research.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that, people, any kind of epidemiological study drives me nuts, right? Because you can extrapolate almost anything you want from. And I'm asking you the question. I was asking an epidemiologist over at UVA who was he was the one telling us, you need to get the shot, you need to get the shot, get the shot, get the shot. And I said to him, I said, Doc, why? Because he's also a medical doctor, but he does work in epidemiology. I said, why is it when COVID first came out, they scared the crap out of us and told us everyone was going to die? You had to leave your packages outside so that the sun can beat on them and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, when I got COVID, it was like less than a common cold for me. Yet we do know other people died from it. Why is it zero for one guy? Like, I
Mm.
didn't know I had it. I just knew I had a cold. And then at some point during my cold, I couldn't taste anymore. Like I couldn't taste my coffee.
Hmm.
And that's weird. And Serena goes, oh, let's take a test. And I took the test and I had COVID. And she had COVID maybe 6 months before me.
Hmm.
Right. And by the way, when she had COVID, we slept in the same bedroom. We were together the whole time. We didn't know until the end of her COVID. So why is it that it was so dangerous and you had to be 6 feet apart, yet the woman I'm sleeping in the same bed with had COVID? I didn't get it. I got it 6 months later. God only knows where I got it from. I came in off of a flight and had COVID, right?
Hmm.
Why all the differences, or do we even know?
Oh, we know. I mean, we haven't studied it in depth on purpose, but we know there's a long list of genetic differences for the ACE2 receptor. So when COVID gets into your bloodstream, it doesn't just float around. It has to bind receptors on the surface of your cells, and then the cells take up the virus, and then that's the problem. And there's a receptor called the ACE2 receptor. We just call it ACE2, but it's ACE is how it's spelled, like a fighter ace or something, fighter pilot ace.
Mm-hmm.
And the ACE2 receptor, I can't remember how many genetic differences there are. There's at least a dozen. I think there's closer to 20 genetic differences just on that one receptor. So you can have one guy where the virus just does not stick to his cells. It just kind of goes in your body and your body flushes it out. And then you can have another guy with a different genetic version of the ACE2 receptor, and all the virus is just sticking to his cells, and his cells are just absorbing that virus, and it's a real problem, and it's much worse for his body, whether he's obese or not. It's just a genetic difference, and there's not a lot of research into that. In fact, I did a bunch of videos on the research as it was coming out during COVID, complaining about the masking nonsense, complaining about the vaccines, corruption, and YouTube removed a bunch of my videos. They just straight up took them off. They didn't even argue with them. They just took them out. But I think you can still go on my YouTube channel and look up my early video on like ACE2 receptor genes and all the different nuances, because I don't remember it anymore because I don't pay that much attention to that specific thing, because again, nobody was studying it. I was just saying, here's a bunch of genes, genetic differences between people. There's over a dozen of them. Let's look at them. That's all I was trying to get out in the public. I wanted people to research them. And of course, as you know, I do genetic consulting, so it's a big thing for me, and it makes a big difference for people. And the more we understand about the genetic differences, the better. And of course, 23andMe now went bankrupt, which it's predictable, right? I mean, you've got the CEO was the like the Google co-founder's wife, and there was a lot of confidentiality question marks, and people were always nervous about that company. And then they got hacked in October, and that didn't help. And but the point is, you can do a spit test. You spit in a tube, you send it back to these companies like Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, whatever, and it's less than $100, and you can look at these genes. And even 23andMe tests were looking at the ACE2 receptor, even before they knew it was important for COVID. So there's a lot of information there that you can find out. But again, it kind of got ignored. It kind of got swept under the rug because they wanted to push the vaccine. And that's the problem with drumming up a bunch of fear and fear-mongering, is they wanted to push the vaccine at the expense of all the other good research that could have been done.
Yeah, so that would stand to reason. I'm guessing my brother, who weighs 340 pounds, has the same genetics that I would have.
Yep.
So for us, COVID, we're lucky. COVID, it becomes the common cold.
Exactly.
Right? And he's, he was on that spectrum of, hey, 340 pounds, you should be dead, sucker. And I called him on day 3. I was like, geez, man, is he in the hospital yet? Because they had people it was like in the ventilator days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, geez, is he in the hospital yet? So I called him, and I'm telling him, hey, Mark, man, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what's that noise I'm hearing? He goes, oh, I'm in the swimming pool. Like, you're what? I thought he was like in bed under the covers, thermometer in his mouth, cold compress on his head. He goes, I'm in the pool. I was like, well, wait a minute. You have COVID, right? He goes, yeah. I said, you feel okay? He goes, I feel great. I feel good. He goes, I got a little sniffle. That's about it. I'm sleeping in the other bedroom. My wife is, we're not sleeping in the same bed. That's what he did for COVID. Mm-hmm. Right. So it was, I'm glad that you're clearing that up. So it has a lot to do with your genetics. I want to get into the 23andMe thing, but I need to do a quick ad first. Folks, the one thing that me and Dr. Anthony J. and everyone can agree on is olive oil. Now, we can't agree on all olive oil because we're talking about a lot of things, our country, our FDA and whatnot. It lets us do a lot of cheating. And when it comes to olive oil or any kind of pure oil, you can cut it up to 40%. In other words, you could do this with avocado oil. You could say it's 100% avocado oil. The government allows them to cut it a certain percentage. With the olive oil, they could cut it up to 40%. 40%, and still call it 100% pure olive oil right there on the package. You can lie right on the front. Well, guess what? Not all olive oils are created equally. Villicapelli olive oil, I can vouch for because we have it tested. It's 100% pure olive oil out of Puglia, Italy. I use this stuff here at the house. I contract with them for my vitamin D because with vitamin D, you have to hook it to an oil. We hook it to Villicapelli olive oil, and that's the way we sell it. I want to make sure there's no seed oils over at purevitaminclub.com. That's how much I believe in this olive oil. We get it out of Puglia. You want to get the good stuff to put on your salads and to cook with. Get Villicapelli. And the way you get it is when you go to villicapelli.com, put in promo code Vinnie when you get to checkout. You'll save 10%. VINNIE, no wimpy Y, 10% every single time at Villa Capelli. So go there right now, get yourself some good olive oil, and let them know we sent you. They've been sponsoring this show for about 12 years now. We're talking to the guy who wrote one of my favorite books on the subject. Well, it's the only book I've read on the subject, Estrogeneration. The book is still, it's in the Vinnie book club. So, and I'm going to have Debbie move it right to the front again so that you guys can find it. If you go to VinnieTortorich.com, click on the Amazon banner, it's going to be right in there, right up front. You need to read this book. It's not meant to scare you, but it could scare the crap out of you. And Anthony, you don't have a dog in the fight, right? I mean, you were just telling the truth here. The same thing you were doing with COVID when you were on these. Because listen, Fauci, I remember early on, like everyone's glued to their televisions, right? And Dr. Fauci came on and said, don't wear a mask. He literally, you can find this footage, don't wear a mask, doesn't matter. It's so tiny, no mask. The only mask that would work would be a well-fitted N95 mask that we use in surgery, right? Right. That he goes, and it not just an N95. Is it the KN? The KN was the fake N95, right?
Yeah, same sort of. It's kind of a synonym, yeah. KN or N95. Yep.
Yeah. So, and they said, look, just because you have an N95, it's got to be well fitted. So all of these masks and everything, don't even worry. That's what Fauci was saying at first. Mm-hmm. And then he came back and said, yeah, no, wear a mask. A mask is you got to wear a mask, right? And then at some point, if I'm not mistaken, stop me if I'm wrong, because I want your opinion on this. They started talking about wearing 2 masks.
Yeah.
Like one wasn't enough. Wear double, it's like that's like a 2-bagger in case the first one breaks.
Yeah.
And by the way, none of it works. Right?
Right.
I mean, I saw people smoking. I saw a guy walking down the street, pulled his mask down, took a puff, put his mask up, and blew it out. And it's like bellowing out. It's like, look where the smoke is going. I saw people walking down the street during wintertime, right? And when they would breathe out, you would see the condensation coming out of, the cold air mixing with the warm air. Nothing was staying behind these masks. What say you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's an argument for N95s because N95s have activated charcoal, and activated charcoal has all kinds of unique binding properties to different compounds and viruses and things. But, there was a huge shortage. So they didn't even have those on the market at the time. So they were just telling us like, oh, it doesn't matter. You just wear whatever. And it was just complete nonsense. Again, it was not based on science. It was based on fear-mongering. It's the same with the statins. Do you know my dad's a medical doctor, Vinny? He's a family doctor.
I did know that, yeah.
Yeah, and he remembers back in the day when the normal range for cholesterol was 300 and below. For total cholesterol, back in the early 80s, the normal range was 300 and below. And in 1987, when they invented the statin, they dropped it to like 250. And then a couple of years later, they dropped it to 200. And it had nothing to do with science. It was just complete fear-mongering. I know a lot of medical doctors that remember that. And it's the same with the vaccine. Like if you want to sell a bunch of drugs, you want to fear-monger it. You want to create a population of clients, right, or customers. And that's what they were trying to do. It wasn't based on any research. But of course, the craziest part was the censorship and how all these doctors that are pushing statins were also pushing the COVID vaccine with no data and no research and stuff. It was all the same crowd, And unfortunately, that's the majority of the people in the medical world because they don't want to lose their massive paychecks and their salaries and all that sort of thing. So they don't want to look at the research because they know that might be wrong and they don't want to feel bad about it. Some of them are great and there's a lot of good ones out there, but again, there's a lot of them that just kind of go with the flow and they don't even pay attention to the research.
A couple of things. You brought up a couple of things here. First off, I knew about the cholesterol thing because I've talked about it on the show.
Yeah.
Where I said, when they at first they were saying have a cholesterol below this. And then they went, well, we can sell more if we lower it. So they lowered it. And then they figured out that these drugs, these statins, only really work on the LDL. So they started calling LDL the bad cholesterol because it didn't really affect the other cholesterol. When I tell it to people, they all say, well, I think your tinfoil hat is a bit crooked. It's like, no. I'm just going by because I'm a guy who's been, I had a radio show way back when. I've been listening to this stuff for years. Now, I'm going to take you another one where we were fear-mongered to death. And you, or how old are you, Anthony?
41. Okay,
so you're almost 20 years behind me. So around 1983, I was studying in the Tulane Library.
Okay.
And I went to the bathroom because I used to spend my whole time in the library. So if I had to go, I was in the library bathroom, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm reading the wall in the library. And I see the word AIDS for the first time, early 1983. And I'm like, AIDS. And it's like, yeah, you something, homo, whatever, AIDS. I'm like, homo, AIDS, what? So I went back to my desk where I was studying, and my friend Janie was there. I said, Janie, what, homo means homosexual. And she goes, yeah. I went, okay, I know that. What is AIDS? And she goes, oh, I just heard about this a few months ago. It's a disease that only gay people can get. That's the way. That's how naive we were back then. There was no internet. There was no nothing.
Yep.
But Janie had heard this information, right? I said, you don't say. They get it because they're gay. She goes,
yeah.
It's transmitted amongst gays. And I said, I'm being, like Bambi. I'm a babe in the woods. I'm like, how?
Right.
How? Right? And she goes, I don't know. But it's only a gay disease. That was the first thing I heard about AIDS.
Sure.
Within 5 minutes of that conversation in history, by 1984, we started seeing articles, there's news stories at night on the 6 o'clock news. AIDS can affect everyone. By 1985 and 86, wear a condom. You got to wear a condom. It's not a gay disease. It's straight people. It's, because at first they were going, it's not just gays and it's not just intravenous drug users, straight people. And then they said, then it's kind of like the old, Breck commercial. Breck had an ad. It's like, you tell a friend and they tell a friend and so on and so on and so on. So he said, here's the deal. You sleep with this girl, right? You've now slept with every girl, every guy she slept with besides you. And that branches out to everyone they slept with. It was like a game of pyramid. Remember Airplane, the game of Airplane? Yep. So if you sleep with one person, what they're saying is you sleep with one person, you're sleeping with the whole world.
Yep. I
right?
can see that. That fear. Yeah.
So immediately I said, how's that possible? If that was possible, we all already have AIDS. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, cut to 1990 or 91. Let's call it 1991. It might have been 90. I'm living in LA. And I have a doctor who is a big deal over at Cedars-Sinai, like a big deal, as one of my clients. And I said, and she was working with the federal government, with Dr. Fauci on the whole AIDS thing. And I said to her, Patty, is it true that everyone I've slept with and everyone they've slept with and so on? She goes, no, that's not true. It's largely intravenous drug users and homosexual males. And I said, well, why are they telling us that everyone gets it? She goes, you have a greater chance of being struck by lightning, but it's the fear tactics that Dr. Fauci came up with to get everyone on board. Right. I didn't know that that was something that the government did until someone who was working with that organization cleared it up for me. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it's effective, right? I mean, especially back then, because people had a lot more trust for the doctors. nowadays, that's been eroded. People, it's been, they cry wolf, right? You cry wolf, you cry wolf, you cry wolf. Eventually people just say, come on, there's no wolf, right?
Right.
And they've done this in a lot of cases. And you can, it's frustrating, right? When people have a thyroid disorder, the doctors oftentimes don't care because there's not a whole lineup of prescription drugs to sell people for their thyroid. But then when people have totally normal cholesterol, they manipulate the normal range and they try and scare them and say they're going to have a heart attack because they have a huge lineup of drugs just lined up and ready to rumble for the heart disease stuff and cholesterol nonsense. It's funny, Vinny. I did a debate with a cardiologist, and it's not publicly available. It was on a private YouTube group. It was for a guy. He's got 500,000 followers on YouTube, and he wanted me to debate this cardiologist. He actually called me on the phone. He's a business guy. Called me on the phone and says, Doc J, my doctor wants me on statins. And I'm like, don't do it. And he goes, well, don't you want to hear about my blood test? And I was like, sure, but don't do it. And he goes, well, I pay a lot of money out of pocket for this cardiologist, and he's super high end and all this. And I was like, yeah, don't do it. And he goes, well, can you come and debate this guy? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do that. So he sets up this like private VIP group that he's got, and I go on the show, and this doctor comes on.
Can I guess at the name of the doctor? And if I do, will you?
No, I'm not going to say his name, but he comes on.
I'm going to guess at a doctor, and I don't want you to say who it is, but I want you to text me later on and say you were right or you were wrong. Okay, so
all right.
Keep your poker face.
Yeah,
it was Dr. Alo. I'm going with Dr. Alo.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say anything, but but here's the thing that you might be interested. He comes on, and the first thing he says is, I looked at the blood work and I decided you don't need to be on cholesterol drugs. By the way, I had all these studies lined up, and I was all ready to go through all these studies and all this. In fact, he didn't want him on statins. He wanted him on Repatha. You know what Repatha is?
I do not.
It's like the highest end of statins. It's like an injectable statin. It's like a super extreme version of statins, which is even worse for people. And by the way, if you go on the Repatha's own website, it's called repatha.com. It doesn't say rare side effects. It says common side effects, diabetes, right? Because if you shut off your ability to burn fats, you're going to get diabetes. You're going to have to burn sugar for energy, which is literally what they're doing to people. They're forcing them to burn sugar for energy, right?
Unbelievable.
So I was all set up to go through all this stuff, but this doctor, I think he was a little more open-minded than most people, and probably maybe just in this one case because he knew I was going to grill him on the studies. But that's just fear-mongering, right? These guys have just been pushed and pushed and pushed to promote the drugs and ignore the stuff where it doesn't matter, like vitamin D, right? You never heard about vitamin D from Fauci, right? And that's super valuable for COVID and for literally everything, for your testosterone and on and on and on. But they're not making money on it, right? Did you know folic acid used to be patented, Vinny, in the 1990s?
I didn't.
In your supplement, you use the methylfolate. You have the good stuff.
Yeah, we use methylfolate.
Yeah, but folic acid is a synthetic compound, and that's why doctors are always pushing that nonsense, and they're trained in medical schools to push folic acid under pregnant women and stuff. It's not because it's so necessary. When you're pregnant, you need vitamin A. Otherwise, you get birth defects. You need vitamin D or you get birth defects. You need vitamin B1 and B3 and B12 and whatever. And the only one they push is the fake version of B9, which is folic acid, because they have a patent on that in the 90s. In fact, the US government, you can look this up, but in 1998, the FDA mandated that companies put folic acid in grain products, cereal grains.
Wow.
So companies don't even have a choice in America. If you're going to sell cereals and stuff, you have to put fake folic acid in there. And obviously their good stuff is methylfolate, which is literally good for people. But the gene, you've heard of the MTHFR gene, right?
Yeah.
People that have this gene, they struggle to process this fake nonsense, and it causes all kinds of disruptions in your brain and in your body and just in general, sleep sometimes. I don't know. There's a lot of fallout from that, but there's so many things like that, right? It just always tracks back to the money, whether it was the Fauci AIDS thing and he wanted to push AZT on everybody. Do you remember the AZT?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, like I used to research that. I in college I researched AZT. You know, my professor wanted me to like do a bunch of studies on it. I was looking at that.
Is
Uh,
that the one that causes lipodystrophy?
I don't remember. I was researching it in college, so it was a long time ago, but I was pretty much just doing the biochemistry. I was looking at inhibitors of reverse transcriptase enzymes, and it was
Mm,
really basic biology stuff. I wasn't in the medical stuff at that point. So I
okay.
don't know, honestly. I don't remember, but it's definitely toxic. It's definitely bad for people. In a research study, it's interesting from an academic perspective, but holy shit, that stuff is toxic for humans, right?
Yeah.
And Fauci was promoting that. And a lot of this, I think you're right. Like a lot of the side effects of quote unquote AIDS were because of the AZT treatments, right? They weren't from the AIDS, they were from the friggin' drugs they were giving people.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, it's always just back to the drugs and the corruption and the money. All these stories, right? They're all a common thread. You know, it's just the corruption, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of doctors still aren't aware of that. There's a lot of people. I mean, I think our culture has changed a lot in the last 5 years in a good way because people are talking about it now. People are waking up to it. It's undeniable with the COVID vaccine. And that retroactively makes people recognize a lot of the shenanigans that are going on with the statins and everything else. So I think it's saving people's lives because of all the corruption. And it's just the awareness of it.
What should we know, or what should we think about RFK? Where are we on RFK?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super positive. You know, he's read my book. He quotes it all the time, and so that's a good sign. You know, he's on the cutting edge of a lot of these artificial chemicals, and he knows what's going on, and he's not afraid to harm his reputation because people have been so, you know, angry and mean to him directly. He's kind of throwing that to the wind and saying he's just trying to say, let's just fix people's health the best way we can. Let's untangle all this nonsense. But it remains to be seen, you know. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I like the idea of like let's clean up the food system. Let's clean up the baby formula. That's Operation Stork Speed is the most recent thing he's promoted and proposed, and I'm a huge fan of that because the baby formula is just garbage. It's literally high fructose corn syrup is the number one ingredient on most baby formulas. And
Crazy.
then the second ingredient is soy milk, you know, soy protein or whatever. It's just all kinds of soy estrogen. So far, so good, you know?
Yeah, you know, people write to me because I've been saying ever since he got in, you know, it's like, look, I want the best. I'm not one of these people that go, not my president. I don't care. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care. You know, if Biden was in there doing a great job, more power to you. I want whoever's president on the right or the left. I'm never pulling for these people to do bad.
Yeah.
Because if Biden does bad, like everyone on the right was going, I want Biden to suck. I want him to do bad. I want Kamala to die. Why? If they're doing a good job, we all prosper as Americans.
Right.
And now Trump is in there. I don't. You're like Maha. What about? It's like I don't care. I don't care who's in. If this guy RFK, he's against vaccines. I've never heard him say he's against vaccines. I've listened to interviews with the guy where he goes, yes, some vaccines are good, but I'm not sure about all of these vaccines, right? Do you feel the same way about him? I mean,
Exactly.
people are going, it's like, wait, wasn't you guys on the left, you guys had RFK. You didn't want him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and he's trying to promote studies. He wants more vaccine studies that are publicly available and actual randomized control trials and things like that, because they never do them. They don't do randomized control trials with vaccines. They give people one vaccine and then they compare it to a different vaccine. Like they give people a flu shot and then they compare that to people with MMR shots or whatever. They don't do it with zero vaccines. Heaven forbid you find something bad about some type of vaccine or another vaccine. So he's just promoting science. He's promoting real science. And then people are saying like, oh, I hate that guy. And it's like, well, it's fine. You know, again, like, I think you're right. Anything that improves the country's health, obviously at this point, it's gotten so bad. It's necessary. We got to do something. And the worse it gets, the more extreme people are going to get. Right.
Yeah.
So better to start now and start cleaning this stuff up, because if it gets any worse, it's going to be even more extremism and even more craziness. So I'm on board with just like whatever's good for the country is I'm going to promote, and if it's bad for the country, I'll probably say something about it and negative.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not all up RFK's ass, and I'm not in love with him. I want to see him do a good job.
Right, same.
I don't care who it is. People go, Joe Rogan is like, what was the one I heard the other day? Someone goes, if the left had someone like Joe Rogan, and then someone else said,
he was left.
The left had Joe Rogan.
Exactly.
They decided to hate him, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had a guy on a week or two ago, and I want you to either agree or debunk this guy. Mm-hmm. And I'm only doing this because I'm not trying to hurt this guy. Mm-hmm. I always want to know the truth. Now, he owns a raw milk company, probably one of the biggest ones in the United States. He's out in California. And I had him on the very same Friday show. And I asked him questions about listeria and this and that and the whole thing, and if raw milk is actually good, and if we're getting any extra quality from raw milk. What are your views on raw milk and where we're headed with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's been demonized, so that's interesting. Because I think there's only been like 12 deaths from raw milk in the last like 50 years or something. It's like it's so ridiculous that the government demonizes it, and they go after these Amish people and stuff, and they throw it out, and they fine these Amish people. I don't know if you saw that news in Pennsylvania.
I did not. No.
They've been doing this for a long time, but even recently they keep doing it. But I'll tell you what I personally do. I go to an organic farmer. Literally, I know him by name. I go there sometimes. Most of the time my wife goes there, but he has a huge stainless steel mixing machine, and he's got all these not Teflon, sorry, that's bad, silicone tubes that go to this thing. And he pushes a button and mixes up the milk, and he opens this thing, and I hold glass jars under, and he fills them up for me. I literally give it to my kids. That's what I personally do. So that should tell you what I think about raw milk. And does that mean I'm super anti-dairy that's conventional? Not necessarily, but it's very genetically different. Like some people are extremely sensitive to dairy, and they have really bad genes, and I tell them to get off the cheese and the yogurt and the whole 9 yards because it's causing inflammation. And some people have amazing genes and they can handle dairy, and their ancestors probably did it for thousands of years. And I think raw milk is definitely better if you're choosing between pasteurized and raw, because pasteurizing is literally just by definition destroying proteins, and bacteria. And there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. We're way past this idea that germs are bad, right? Like this idea that came out of like the 50s or whatever, like, oh, bacteria are bad. It's like, well, that's not really true, because we have probiotics and we have all kinds of healthy gut bacteria and skin bacteria and milk bacteria. So it's good to have that stuff. Sure, you don't want to leave it sitting around for 5 weeks and then try and drink it, right? That's the problem. Is I think the government promotes the pasteurization and things just because the big food companies like that, and it's easier to make sure everything doesn't get rotten. It's just back to the money and the profits. But I'm a big fan of raw milk, and I'm also a fan of the Weston A. Price Foundation for promoting the raw milk. Like they have some wacky ideas in some aspects, and everybody does. I probably do too, and everybody would say that about just about anything. But I'm very glad the Weston A. Price Foundation exists, and they went out and hired lawyers and they fought for raw milk, because it used to be illegal in like 49 states and now it's legal in like 49 states. Completely flipped it, and that was mostly their foundation with their legal team.
Well, the way it works in the state, I'm trying it for the first time. It hasn't come in yet. I've signed up. Mm-hmm. The way they do it is you have to buy into a share of a cow. Right. Okay. And it's a one-time fee with this company, $15. Mm-hmm. And you have to take at least a half a gallon per week of milk.
Okay.
That's more milk than my wife and I will use, mm-hmm. because she's British and she puts a little in her tea every afternoon. Mm-hmm. So we had to get the half gallon because I wanted to get the kefir and the raw cream. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't get those two without getting the half gallon of milk. Yep. So I'm going to try to drink up the rest of the half gallon of milk to see what that does to my blood sugar. Obviously, milk has a lot of lactose. I'm going to mess around with it. If I can't get that half gallon down before the next week comes up, I have dogs and cats. You know, I'll just mix it with their food and just make sure that that half gallon is consumed by someone in my house or some animal in my house before the end of the week. Because I'm just interested in the kefir, the raw kefir, and the raw, you know, heavy cream. You know, so yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were, because for the first time I'm going down that highway. I don't like to suggest things on the show. I like to try them. I like to talk to experts, people like yourself, people like the guy. He explained to me, I said, well, how did raw milk? He goes, look, think about it. People moved into the cities and the whole thing. And, you know, you were trying to milk cows, and people are stepping in cow shit with these boots on and everything, stepping in the milk. None of that exists anymore, right? Exactly. It's all very sterile. And your chances of getting, look, anytime you hear about listeria, it's coming from lettuce. Anytime you hear about E. coli, it's on lettuce, right? It's on vegetables. It's never on meat. It's never on dairy. When was the last time you heard of E. coli on meat or listeria on meat? You just don't hear it, right? It's vegetables. Every time it happens, right? It's a recall of something out of California.
Right. Good point. Yeah. Well, and you know, it's funny. We used to get raw milk in Minnesota from our friends, and they had a Jersey cow or a Guernsey cow, one of these brown cows. And that stuff, man, it's literally like 50% cream. I mean, it's unbelievable because it settles, right? And by the way, I'm a very anti, you know, those, like, you know how you don't have to shake you don't have to shake conventional dairy.
Right, because it's homogenized. It's all.
Yeah, they put emulsifiers in there. And if you start researching emulsifiers, you find it basically weakens your gut lining, right? It's basically detergent. It's tasteless detergent that weakens your gut lining. And so I'm very against emulsifying. Like, it's completely unnecessary. We don't have to do that. Just shake your milk. You know what I mean? But it was cool because the raw milk I get now is from Holstein cows, unfortunately. So it has less cream. But man, that Jersey stuff is like 50% cream. It's phenomenal. It tastes different. I think it's better for people. But that's, if you're burning fat for energy, you got to eat that fat, you know?
Yeah. Look, I can't, you know, I eat, as you know, straight butter, you know, and by the way, I get my butter from an Amish guy.
Oh, nice. Right?
Yeah, we get real butter all the time. And when I mentioned it to Serena, it's like, Serena, listen, I've been wanting to bring this up to you for a while, and I know you're going to probably be against it. And I said, I want to do raw milk. She goes, I didn't get the word milk out. She's like, yes, do it, because they grew up with raw milk.
Nice.
Right? She lived in a village in England, right? And there was a village cow, or 2 or 3, right? So she's very familiar with it, and she's like, I love it. Can't get enough of it. So we're going to it, right? We're going to give it a shot.
Yeah. And I personally know people that are sensitive to grocery store milk, and then they go to the raw milk at this farmer that I have in town here, and they can have it, no problem. And that says a lot, right? There's something going on with their immune systems, and like I said, there's probiotics, there's a lot. And just, again, it should be a choice at least, right? People should at least be able to choose. The fact that the government is demonizing it, that's the insanity to me. That's what's frustrating to me. And I get it. Like you said, there's a historical reason when people were walking around with shit all over themselves, human feces probably too, right? And then they were milking their cows, and just all the nonsense from 100 years ago when there was zero recognition of hygiene and washing your hands and just basic things. But we don't have to worry about that anymore. Let's get past the old, antiquated fear of raw milk. That's what I think.
I'm going to finish up here with 23andMe. We touched on it for a second, a few minutes ago, but I want to go back to it. Everyone is saying, get your name out of that database. I don't think there is getting your name out of that database. I'm in there, as a matter of fact. You did this extra super duper thing you took my 23andMe, I sent it to you, and you did a deeper dive, which, by the way, folks, if you could go back and find that podcast, is one of the most interesting podcasts I've ever done. First off, do you still do that? Can you take someone's spit test? Explain what you do over at AJ Consulting with that, and then let's talk about 23andMe on top of it.
Thanks, Vinny. Yeah, I do that still, for sure. I think it's very valuable. It's amazing how many lives I've transformed just talking to people individually and just looking at their genetics and saying, this is really good for you, this is really bad for you, here's the supplements you need, here's the blood tests you got to focus on. Some people have some rare genes and they're just totally ignoring them, and the doctors don't care. Like the medical system just waits until you have a heart attack before they start looking at stuff like that, right? And it's very preventable. But yeah, the 23andMe company, I think you're right. I don't think there's any way of getting your name out of the system. I've always advocated for people to use an alias, like spit in a tube. By the way, MyHeritage is a really good company. MyHeritage DNA test. It's $35 right now. It's on sale, so you can do a DNA test. They measure 700,000 SNPs for $35, which is ridiculously cheap. Yeah. And then you send me that data, the raw data file, which the company gives you. And by the way, I always tell people use an alias, like use a fake name. If you want to get it under a fake credit card, you can get like a prepaid credit card or use your buddy's credit card. So even the credit card's not associated with your name. But if you uncheck all the permissions boxes where it says like, I don't allow you to use my data, whatever, you check all the boxes, or you basically just inhibit them from using your data. Legally, they're not supposed to give out your data. And there are companies like, there's a company called My Happy Genes, and they will delete all your data off the website and stuff. So there's companies that are ethical, they're good, that are doing the DNA testing, and it's a lot cheaper than ever. And the data is phenomenal. So I think it's worth the trade-off, meaning like the risk of having your DNA data in the system somewhere is worth it for having all that health information that you can tap into. And you know that from experience talking about your genetics. And again, it's unfortunate because 23andMe is kind of giving a black eye to the whole industry here because, you know, again, they got hacked in October, which started a lot of this stuff off. And and then the bankruptcy now is making big news. And then people are saying, oh yeah, 23andMe is terrible and all this. And it's like, well, but they've always been a little bit questionable. Let's be honest, that particular company.
I can't remember. Did I do 23andMe, or do you even remember? I can't remember.
I don't remember. You probably did Ancestry.com. You know, I probably recommended that back then.
Yeah, it was whatever you recommended. And they gave me a cursory amount of information. It's like, oh, you're Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. I learned that from them.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, you're almost 100% Italian. Whoop-de shit. I kind of knew that because half the people I grew up with spoke broken English. On both sides of my family. Well, on one side, they were all English and Cajun. And the other side, you know, they went back in and out of Italian. It's like I knew who I was.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you, folks, for that. And then right after that, I sent it to you, and we learned all kinds of stuff. The thing Serena still talks about is I can never get enough salt in my body. I literally have my own little cup of salt that I pinch to put extra on everything. You know, it's always sitting in my tray.
Yep.
Yeah. And I learned that from you. You said it to me. I didn't tell you that. You said you need salt all the time, don't you? And Serena went, oh my God, I've never seen anyone use so much salt.
Yeah, it's a bit of a crystal ball. Yeah. Well, and I know exactly what gene you're talking about because a lot of people have that. And by the way, I love the Pure Vitamin Club electrolytes. It's phenomenal. You know, the pill. A lot of people don't like putting the powders in their water and all that stuff. It's super salty. They just want to take a pill, and I push them over there and I tell them to go to Vinny's thing and get the Pure Vitamin Club one. It's amazing. The ingredients are phenomenal. I feel really good on that stuff. Some of those electrolyte supplements, you take them and you get heart palpitations and like weird heartbeats and stuff, and it's just too much, and it's weird ingredients and obviously sugar. But yeah, I appreciate that.
I cheated though. I hired a couple of scientists from Amgen to help me.
Oh yeah.
And literally I told them, I want to reverse engineer sweat. And they thought about that for a minute and they said, why hasn't everyone taken this approach to making electrolytes, right? And I'll never forget, there was the first year I was sponsoring Badwater 135, the hottest race on the planet. It starts in Death Valley, California. It's 125 degrees or so when it starts.
Right.
And this doctor, this PhD, this college professor, came up to me because we sent it out to all the racers before, you know, like months ahead of time, so they can all use it, you know, get used to it before the race. And he said, hey, would you mind giving me a few minutes? And I went over and he was like, who came up with this formula? And I said, well, it's my company. I did. And he looked at me and he goes, are you a doctor? And I said, no. He goes, are you a scientist? I said, no. He goes, and you're telling me you came up with this formula. See, I didn't realize he was a professor and a PhD and the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what are you getting at, sir? He says, I'm Professor so-and-so from blah, 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 blah. And when you sent me the stuff in the mail, we deconstructed it in our lab and we did a deep dive on it. I want to see what was in your electrolyte.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the exact pH balance of sweat.
Oh, yeah.
I said, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I said, we deconstructed sweat. He goes, how did you figure that out? I said, no. I hired a couple of scientists over at Amgen Corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Amgen, folks, is a big drug company that makes, Neupogen and Epigen and all these incredible drugs that, Lance Armstrong used to win races. And when he found out that I used actual scientists at a drug company, he was relieved because he didn't want to think that some idiot happened upon this.
That's funny. It's a good idea, though. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Well, that's my approach to everything I do. It's like, okay, what are we trying to do with an electrolyte? We're trying to replace something. What are we trying to replace?
Yep.
Well, we're trying to replace what we're losing at a large degree.
Oh, yeah.
Is that
no, it works. It feels good. I like it. Like I say, it's on my website. I literally recommend it all the time, just talking to people. So, yeah, man, good job with that. It's funny. I've read Scott Jurick's book and all these guys that run that Badwater Ultra. I think that Badwater Ultra is one of the craziest things people do just on the planet. It's insane. It's wild to watch.
It is nuts. And Jerker is one of the best guys out there. Yeah. And by the way, he does it and he's a vegan.
I know.
He's doing this and he's a vegan. The people go, and they go, vegans can't do anything. It's like, well, there's one. One. Somehow he's a genetic, that guy's a genetic freak.
It's a good example. Yeah. People have different genes. And then of course you got, the guy that set the world record in the 100-mile race is basically a carnivore. What's his name? Gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but he did a podcast with Sean Baker a long time ago. Zach Bitter. Bitter, B-I-T-T-E-R.
Zach Bitter. Yeah, Zach. I used to bring Zach on back when we first started the show.
Yeah, exactly. He's phenomenal, and he's basically a carnivore, so he's on the complete end of that spectrum, and he's also exceptional. So I like that. I think everybody's diverse. There's a lot of diversity in the population, and people should be doing different things. I don't know if they need to go that extreme one way or the other, but but it's good to see.
No, I use Zach Bitter all the time as an example of a low-carb athlete that does really well. Look, Tim Noakes was on the show not long ago because we often thought that once you get to 80% of your aerobic capacity, your body's using too much sugar. And Tim Noakes took some well-trained, I want to say middle-distance runners, but these are Olympic trial kids and the whole thing, so not your average. And he got them fat adapted over X number of weeks or maybe several months or whatever in their off season, and literally got them to 87% of their aerobic capacity on nothing but fat.
Wow.
No sugar whatsoever, just homeostasis, the sugar that's in your blood, in your muscles, in your liver. And he was able to get them to sustain at 87. That's close to zone 4 when you get up to 87%.
Wow, that's clean. I like it. Yeah. Did you see that guy, Alex McDonald? He ran 5 marathons 5 days in a row with 0 food.
I did. I didn't study him, but Mike McKnight did a similar thing where he went 200 miles nonstop, and he used my ultra salt, and he wanted to make sure that he got 0 calories of anything else. So he opened up the ultra salts because he didn't even want the gelatin capsule, right? He wanted to see if he could just run on electrolytes and water.
Wow.
And he was able to go 200 miles. No problem. Yeah.
Super. That's fascinating. I'd never heard that one. That's really interesting.
Oh yeah. He's been on the show several times. Really cool kid. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, yeah. But yeah, Vinny, I appreciate you, man. Keep up the good work over there with Pure Vitamin Club and your podcast, and appreciate you bringing me on today, man.
hang out because we have to wait till this uploads. So it's going to take a minute to upload whenever we're done here. Folks, you know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. Rate and review this podcast. Rate it and review it. I know that doesn't sound like much. You hear it all the time, but go and do that. Go check out AJ Consulting Company. That's Dr. Anthony J. He will tell you more about yourself than any other. You need to do this. And it's not expensive. You got to go to this guy. You got to do this. You know, what is a pound of that is worth a pound of, what is that saying?
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Thank you. There you have it, folks, right from the doctor's mouth. And if you get a chance, Debbie's going to put it right at the top of the podcast, at the top of my page on Amazon. Go check out Estrogeneration. On behalf of Dr. Anthony J., my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.